And to President Kenyatta, thank you for that inspiring introduction to this session as well. And on behalf of Education Development Trust, I'd also like to add my thanks to Rewired and to Dubai Cares for putting on this really amazing event. The rewiring of education requires three key things: the political ambition to drive change, financing to fuel action, and critically importantly, the right evidence to unlock effective solutions. The need for efficient and equitable spending, which is grounded in strong evidence of what actually works and leads to positive impact, is more important now than it has ever been before. Efficiency and equity have always been defining features of effective education policy, and the global pandemic has further accentuated their importance. And as we've heard from President Kenyatta, the learning crisis we are facing requires urgent action if we are going to achieve the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. This plenary session will shed light on the political leadership and commitment already in place to improve, as the Kenyatta Declaration says, to improve the volume, the equity and the efficiency through domestic financing of education, and how the evidence and the data have informed the choices that people have made. And I'm delighted to welcome a distinguished panel onto the stage now to be able to join in a conversation around these key issues. So please can I first welcome the Minister of Education from Tanzania, Her Excellency Joyce Ndlechako. And also the Cabinet Secretary for Education from Kenya, His Excellency Professor George Magoha. And His Excellency David Senga, who is the Minister of Education from Sierra Leone. And we're also going to be joined by a pre-recorded video by the Minister of Education from Cambodia. And again, there's obviously something to celebrate now with the Cambodia signing up to the GPE Declaration, and that's His Excellency Dr. Hang Chuan Naron. And really importantly, I'm also delighted to welcome Mary Jacob Okwoza, who is a Global Partnership for Education youth leader from Nigeria. And I'm going to address my first question to Mary Jacob. Now, as you will know, evidence shows that the 2020 COVID school disruptions caused learning loss equal to all the learning gains in the last 2 decades in many lower-income countries. And we know that the complexities and the costs of recovery will almost certainly be highest in those countries with the worst learning poverty pre-COVID. So from your perspective, Mary Jacob, what are some of the barriers to learning that children and young people face in Nigeria, and for which more and better financing could make a difference?
Thank you very much. So I would always say that in times of oppression, the already oppressed feel it the most. Children were missing most of their lives from learning because of the pandemic. And this was a pandemic that hits the entire world. Yet some children were facing it more than other children were. And that for me was because of the gaps, the economic gaps that were already existing. So many children from poorer homes actually are the higher population of the world. And then during the pandemic, where we had to move to the digital space and children had to study online and have access to quality education, these children from these poor homes did not have the same face. And that was because there was a huge economic gap existing before the pandemic. This economic gap is not something their parents can bridge. It's not something the children themselves can do. It is something only financing, adequate financing can bridge. Bridging this space is something that should be a priority of the government. Because if we do not do it, if we do not make it urgent for more domestic financing and for more global funds to go to giving these children from these poorer homes adequate access, we'll keep leaving them out from what the world thinks. We'll keep leaving them out from building their capacity for the 21st century, thereby putting them on the stage with their counterparts from a more privileged home, more privileged societies, and yet not equipping them enough to be in those societies. So with financing, without financing, more children were out of school. Without financing, more children lost those years of their lives, those months of their life that we cannot repay, we cannot give them back without financing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary Jane. There's a very powerful challenge there for our ministers, the critical importance of providing that access through financing for the least advantaged members of society. So, a quick fire question to all the ministers present now. So, from your perspectives as ministers of education, why does the volume and effectiveness of investment in education matter as we seek to achieve SDG 4 and to build back better? And how can we ensure that the money is spent in a way that leads to equitable outcomes based on good use of the evidence? And Minister Ndlechako, maybe I can start with you.
Okay. Fine, thank you. Thank you, moderator, for giving me this opportunity. In my view, I think the volume and effectiveness of investing in education matters because, to me, I think those two things are key determinants to achieving equitable, inclusive, and quality education for all. Because you need to invest in education in terms of infrastructure, teaching and learning materials. You need to have competent and motivated teachers, not only competent but motivated teachers, and all these need resources. And in order to be sure that the investment brings effect, especially to children in marginalized areas, we need to make sure that we have correct information, because we need to have accurate statistics and information on what is needed where, so that our allocation of resources is based on the actual needs. And in Tanzania, we have improved significantly our education management information system. Currently, we are capturing data from school level, so we have accurate information. What we are doing now is to make sure that the information which is available is put into use for making education decision. And I'm most pleased that next year our country is going to do national census, which will provide us another additional information, because the education management information system takes on board children who are already in school, but we don't know who are out of school. So we'll get more information about the school-age children, where they are, and children with special needs, because somehow they tend to be forgotten in the system, so that we can ensure that we take them on board when we are planning for education, and we make sure that we plan adequately, we invest in education, so that we can be able to attain quality education and equitable education for all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So data is absolutely crucial, but it's of course also how you use that data to make a difference. Professor Magoha, maybe we can turn to you now to tell us something about the Kenyan perspective on this.
Thank you very much. I'm a little bit on the lucky side because President Kenyatta is my president, and I will start from his declaration, where he emphasized the significance of top management of government in supporting the ministries of education across the world. And you can see that from my perspective, I have his full support. So for my other colleagues, it is important that the ministries of finance and the education work together because without that, then you cannot move forward. Secondly, I'm proud to say that our country has about 16 million learners in the basic education sector, with another 2 to 3 million in the tertiary education sector. Thirdly, in terms of the numbers, you will find that our constitution mandates primary education to be free and compulsory. So my job is made easier. Mine is to make sure that children are in school. And what we do is to ensure that those who are underprivileged or in the informal settlements are actually taken physically to school. Let me pause by saying that the COVID-19 pandemic has made this a little bit more difficult, and therefore we have had to put more resources to bridge the digital divide. But our government already spends 25.9% of its budget on education. How do we make sure that this money is spent for what it is required? Our government has focused on the less needy and people in the informal areas. And therefore, we have ensured that there is capitation to every child, irrespective of where you are. As far as the secondary school education is concerned, again, 75% of our high schools are day schools. And day school, high school is also free as per the government policy. So people only pay for food and what have you in boarding schools. How have we gone around to ensure that those who need the help most get it? These are the children in informal settlements in towns and in the far flanks, and the girls who get pregnant or who are mothers. We have made sure that there is a school feeding program that targets children in informal settlements, specifically to ensure that either food is bought for and distributed, or money is wired to the schools so that they can feed children who would otherwise have not gone to schools. As far as pregnant girls and nursing mothers are concerned, we ensure that they get all the support. In fact, there is another policy, in addition to 100% transition policy, which basically requires that all children in primary school move to high school. We also have a policy which says that we should mop up children who dropped out of school, and some of these are the children who got pregnant. We ensure that they are supported and taken back to school. In terms of data and how data is efficiently used, we have an education management information system that is currently being rebooted, so that the data we have is real time. Already all schools in Kenya are on GIS. And in addition to the introduction of Huduma number, which will soon be introduced to everybody, it will then be possible to tag down every child, and we should be able to know which child is at school and which child is not at school. Having said all this, that is from the domestic base. This is in no way saying that we do not need help. We need help like yesterday, especially with regards to infrastructure and specifically ICT infrastructure, so that we are empowered to ensure that our flanks, especially those in the flanks and informal settlements, also who may have suffered a little bit more because of COVID, are strengthened to catch up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Senge, can you tell us the experience in Sierra Leone?
Thank you very much. I think it's clear from just what everybody has said that education is about justice. Education really is, when we think about education and the education sector, and we cannot limit education financing to just what happens in the classroom. It's about how we bring people from out of school, it's about school feeding, it's about school health, it's about something that we often don't talk about that has become very apparent in COVID. It's about guidance counseling. You know, guidance counseling, if you look at Education Acts, it says maybe every school should have a guidance counselor, and it's a thing that you put on there. But it's become apparent and so clear that because there are not robust guidance counseling systems that exist to support a child at school and linking with their families, then we've seen that the impact of these school closures and on families has been worse. And when we then think about the cost of education to not just be, very importantly, as my colleagues have said, it's about the textbooks, it's about the teachers, but education financing has to be broader than that. It's about security in the community. It's about the school buses and how people get to school. As we said, it's about school feeding to those who are not even in school. It's about addressing inequity, economic inequality. Then, as much as Kenya is leading the way, and Sierra Leone was one of the first signatories to the Kenyatta Declaration, because we believe in this drive to finance education, and our education budget now is about 22%. We're still trying to get to 25%, but we've been able to add every year, including in the year of COVID. It's important that to the second part of your question, that those monies are used effectively and wisely. One of the things we've done is to digitize our annual school census from 2015 to 2020, and ensuring that we can look at it and try to understand what is leading at all disaggregated levels, districts, gender, school, teachers, and see what is leading to what trends, understand the trends, and see how we can better plan. It's important. I heard from my colleague in Tanzania that they are doing a census next year. Sierra Leone is doing a census now, its population census. And these things matter. People politicize it, and there are those who say, it's politics, you're just trying to do census for elections. But you cannot plan for education if you don't have accurate census. And by the way, thank you to Kenya as well. Kenya has been a great supporter of Sierra Leone in our population census work, including technical and digital support. But when we speak about education financing and how we capture that, it's much bigger than what happens in the classroom, and it's much bigger than the resources that we put in the schools. And it's important that we're able to mobilize as many resources as possible to ensure that children everywhere, those in school and those out of school, can access quality education.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And again, just illustrating that point that without data, without knowledge, without understanding of the reality of the situations, you're planning in a vacuum. So that the critical importance of gathering the data and understanding the real issues within the context. If we could now play the video recording from Minister Hang of Cambodia, who is responding to the same question.
First of all, I would like to thank the Global Partnership for Education, along with the Dubai Care and Education Development Trust, for inviting me to the Rewiring Summit Ministerial Panel today entitled Turning Political Ambition to Financing Action Through Evidence. With regard to the volume and effectiveness of investment in education matter, the Royal Government of Cambodia is fully committed to the Sustainable Development Agenda and continues to contribute positively to the global efforts aimed at leaving no one and no country behind, and has committed to increase level of education budget expenditure towards the 20% global benchmark as mentioned in the GP Summit in London in July, and also highlighted in the additional policy commitments on significant reforms to improve the quality and equity and efficiency of public financial reform for education. How can we do that with limited resources? We must prioritize, speed up school reforms where there are strong commitments. We must build institutional capacity, especially focus on teacher training reform to respond to the rapidly changing educational landscape and economy. We must build education system to be resilient.
Thank you then to Minister Chang. Mary Jacob, if I could come back to you now. Building human capital and investment in the education of children and young people is the cornerstone of the recovery from the pandemic, as well as building strong, green and inclusive economies for the future. So as a youth activist and a leader in your community, from a country and a continent with a huge youth demographic, what will happen if governments don't mobilise substantially more and better financing for basic education, and don't give that priority to disadvantaged students when they make their spending decisions?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So, yes, while listening to Mr. President's speech, he said something: you cannot yield from an investment if you don't invest. And when we look at young people, when we look at education is building knowledge, is empowering young people. And you're not doing it for these young people. It is an investment for your nation. And you cannot expect to have young people doing all the amazing things that you want to see in your nation in the nearest future if you cannot invest in those people to do them. In recent times, we have seen a high level of borrowing from most of our nations, especially in Africa. And when you start thinking about most of these loans we are getting, you realize that it won't be paid today. It might not even be paid up by my generation. It might be paid by the generation after. So the question is, what are we doing with this money we're bringing into the system? How are we investing it? How are we sure that we can repay those loans when the time comes? How are we sure that we are setting the pace and setting the stage well for those to come after us? I run a youth-led organization in Nigeria with Special Humanity, and part of what we do is school clubs. And in these school clubs, I look at the children in these school clubs every day, and sometimes I feel old already, because I begin to imagine that, okay, at this stage of my life, I might not be as old as every other person here, but I know I've gotten to that point where I have younger children looking at me. So the question is, if we don't have adequate funding for education, the little children that I speak for from Nigeria, from Africa, from across the world, what will be their fate in the nearest future? What if we have situations like we have had with the pandemic? Will they survive? What if we have situations that we have setbacks in the economy? How will they sustain it? The situations of our economy now, is it something they can move forward? Or is this where they will be forever? The children, like I would always say, they are not just young people. They are the nation that we are looking at in the nearest future. Look at 20 years from now, look at 10 years from now even. It wouldn't be Jacob, the young youth either. Look, 5 years from now, it might not be me. So the question is, are we investing rightly? And rightly is education. And rightly is an investment that we will be sure it will yield. So it is time that we move from thinking about education budgeting and financing as part of what to put in a budget, to thinking about it as a benchmark for every other sector that we have in our nations and the world. And if we do not fund education urgently, if we do not put money adequately and use it well in education, we will be leaving our nations, our various nations, out in the 21st century, because our children will not be ready for the 21st century jobs and economic developments. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And exactly as you said, it's an investment, isn't it? And you're investing not in the future just of the individuals, the children at school now, but you're investing in the future of the country, and you want to generate that return on investment. If I could turn to you, Minister Njikako, as a minister, and indeed following that as a politician, why do we need to take an ambitious view of the politics of education finance?
I think we need to take an ambitious political view of education financing because return on investment in education takes a long time. And when you have limited resources, you have competing priorities, you tend to invest on something that you can see the results immediately. If you invest in a road, you see it, and if you invest in infrastructure, you see it immediately, but investment in education, the return takes a long time to be realized. And in that case, a political will is required for them to understand the benefit of developing human capital for the country, developing human capital for future development of the country. So in that regard, what we are doing in our country to ensure that we win the political commitment and support, because our budget has to be approved by the members of parliament, first of all is to ensure that we are transparent in terms of what we want to do with the funds that we are requesting. And what we are doing currently, education funds is disbursed directly to the school's account. And transparency also involves awareness of the community members, what the money is disbursed for, and community members also participate in management and overseeing that the money is spent according to what is intended. So we have representation of parents through school boards. So they take part in making such decisions. And also we win political will by ensuring that we make the results known. For example, we have exhibitions for students who participate in science and technology. So those who are doing innovative things, we make them we make public exhibitions so that people can come and see and appreciate why is it important to invest in education. And our country is among the 19 countries which we committed to Kenyatta Declaration, increasing our budget. Our current budget, national budget, is 18.7%, and we have made commitment to increase it to 20 or more than 20% by 2025. And I'm pleased the Minister of Finance has already made commitment that starting from this year, we are going to increase our national budget. And basically, what I can say, when the results are seen, even if it takes a long time to see the impact, because the impact of education, if you invest, for example, in innovation, we say we give them chance to try, make error. So sometimes maybe they may not succeed, but even failure in education is part of the learning process, and we should be able and should be willing to let children try, to make them make mistakes, because all this is part of learning, but at the same time it needs financing to be able to do all of that. Thank you.
Yeah, and absolutely, and obviously these are political choices, aren't they? We have to make the political choice to invest in education, and in order to do that, we need to be able to build those coalitions for change, build that coalition to support that investment. And in order to do that, evidence that it is working, evidence that it's making a contribution not just to individuals, but to the society, to the country as a whole, is really critical. If I can move on now to Minister Sengye. COVID-19 obviously continues to impact education systems right across the world and across GPE partner countries. And this speaks to the need, and an earlier panel this morning touched on this, but the need to seek complementarities across sectors. It's not just about education. It is also about nutrition, water sanitation, hygiene, health. All of these make a contribution to improving education systems. And education and health are critical vehicles for investing in young people. How and why does your government protect investments in the social sector, and how has GPE's support helped you in this?
Thank you. It's a very good question. I mean, I think one way in which we do this is we collaborate very heavily across ministries. So the Minister of Gender and Children's Affairs, whenever she's working on her policies, she makes sure she shares it with me. When I'm working on stuff, I share it with her. The Minister of Social Welfare, in terms of special needs, we closely collaborate. Certainly the Ministry of Higher and Technical Education, we have a joint education sector plan, which we're developing now, supported by GPE. A major part of this, as we develop a new compact with GPE, is to get the systems transformation grant, which we're eligible for, that will be powered on this new education sector plan. I think, as earlier referenced, in Sierra Leone, we're lucky that His Excellency President Julius Maada Bio has made education his flagship. So human capital development is the essence of what we do within governance in Sierra Leone. Our national development plan is titled Education for Development, and so everybody fully understands this. And it doesn't matter where His Excellency goes or where a minister, any minister goes, they will talk about education. And I was going to say whether those ministers want to or not, but you can't talk about health without somebody asking about schools and somebody asking about teachers in the community. You can't talk about local government without the chiefs talking about the school management committees and how effective those are, which the local government people are. And so really, as has been expressed, education is an investment for national development, and that's embedded within our national development plan and fully understood by everyone, because at the highest level, His Excellency President Julius Maada Bio has made this a priority, invests in it, and is our primary champion. But underpinning all of this is really evidence. We cannot have these conversations without evidence. When we talk about the recent anti-corporal punishment ban that we did in Sierra Leone, because there's no evidence that supports that beating children leads to good outcomes in school. It's not there. You look at the evidence, it's not there. When we looked at the ban against pregnant girls in school, there's no evidence that supports that keeping pregnant girls out of school leads to any better moral outcomes. And in fact, education is better for everybody when it's inclusive. The things that we do in Sierra Leone, the policy changes that we power, driven by evidence and data, and if we look at research and evidence and data and support more of that, then what we do becomes effective. And finally, it's not just evidence that the ministry curates. We work with an NGO consortium supported by GPE as well, and this NGO consortium goes and does implementation and writes reports independent of us. There's a CSO, civil society consortium, that goes to every chiefdom in the country, gets data on their own, writes a report, and we see it. So we're listening to what people are saying. We're inviting and encouraging stakeholders to bring the evidence to us, and we'll have a conversation. If we are wrong, we will change it for the betterment of our children.
No, absolutely. And that point about coordination, collaboration at every single level of the system, from the national policy set at the very top, but right down to school levels, to make sure that all the resources are brought together effectively to make a difference, is obviously, from what you're saying, really, really important. Can I turn to you, Professor Magoha? GPE is striving for greater equity in financing. How do we ensure that education spending has maximum impact on the most marginalised?
Thank you very much. Now, like I said before, we have already all our educational institutions on GPS. We have an efficient data management system, and therefore we know where the shoe is biting. And one of the equalizing factors is the transformative action done by the government of His Excellency President Kenyatta, where we were able to get books to all learners from standard 1 to form 4 on a ratio of 1:1, and this was done by saving 70% of the otherwise market forces if this was to be done by the usual manner. The government now has a central procurement plan where it buys books and distributes them and checks and ensures that every child, whether you are in the slums, whether you are in the flanks, whether you are in the good level cities where everything is available, every child is equalized. The book. We also provide capitation per child, and that capitation has taken into account the fact that all children are equal except for the special needs child, who is given about 10 times the amount of money that every other child is given. The capitation money is geared towards providing certain services in the schools so that every child is brought to a certain level. Like I said, in order to ensure that the massification of education, which is actually the government policy, is brought to a logical conclusion, His Excellency the President 3 years ago ordered that every child goes to high school. So we have a 100% transition, and we ensure that we go and look for the weakest link. The poor children in the slums who have performed very well, for example, that deserve to go to very good schools, the government has ensured that we provide scholarships for them. And so that even from the top schools you have this presentation there. I think in order to ensure that money is used for what it is required and that there is a movement towards SDG 4, our goal has been to look at the very weakest link. And as I speak now, we know that the female is a receptacle, and therefore sometimes there are times when the girl child misses school because of the biological nature of the body. The government has moved out of its way to ensure that a sizable amount of money is given every year to buy sanitary pads. Such sanitary pads are distributed physically, and we ensure that all the children who are of the age that require the sanitary pads are given, all girls in primary school. Otherwise, you will find that the girl child perhaps misses some days in school, and this would affect. And just to emphasize the fact that food for school is a very important factor which we have mentioned before. We also ensure that there is a continuous reskilling of teachers and retooling of our teachers, especially with regards to the new curriculum that we are bringing, which is a competency-based curriculum, which will ensure that our children are complete when they leave school. We have also opened up the technical sector, technical and vocational sector, where all children who don't go to high school are able to be unskilled through that sector.
Thank you very much. Regrettably, I've been told that we need to wrap up this session. We could go on for a lot longer. But just a couple of points, and I'm going to give the last word to Mary Jacob as well to finally close this session. But we at Education Development Trust, we passionately believe in the data and the evidence. We believe in being able to make best global practice local, learning from what works, and working in collaboration with our partners around the world to adapt and to develop that, to really make a difference on the ground through the programs that we run. Thank you very much to all our panelists, but as I said, I'm going to give the last word to Mary Jacob, so please.
Thank you very much. So, imagine Rewiring setting and then you go to the lounge, which I know some of us might not have been to, and you see a very people. That is how it is for education, for the population of the world. This room full of people for the Rewired summits are the entire population. And then the few in the lounge are like the few children that are opportune, which are like the small numbers. And then imagine all of us in the room are the children from the poorer cannot access education. I don't think Rewired summits will be successful if we take our panels to the lounge and not address this whole trunk. This goes back to what we are doing at home in our nations. Are we going to continue letting children only from privileged homes, the very tiny population, have access to education, have access to a better future? Or are we going to open it up and bridge the gaps, the economic gap, the gender gaps? Are we going to give more children an opportunity to live their lives to the fullest, thereby giving our nation and our economy the opportunity to blossom? It is in our hands as leaders, as stakeholders, to take the action that is necessary. I could speak from today, tomorrow, and next, but if you don't take the actions, if you don't do what is necessary, nothing will change. I'm asking on behalf of every child across the globe, every learner in the world, every young person, every child. You might not be here tomorrow, but we will be here. And if you're not going to pass the baton to us like the Karate told us yesterday, if you're not going to give us the baton, we wouldn't have anything to run the race with. If we're going to just leave 19 to 20 nations to keep joining the declarations and signing, what happens to the rest of the children in all of your nations? Today, I don't want us to go back home remembering that there was a very tiny Mary Jacob speaking to you on the stage. I want us to go back home rather thinking of what the future would be if we do the needful. Let's imagine the future where every child has equal opportunity and where every one of us can be proud to say that we gave equal opportunities for our nations to do better. Let's invest in the right places. Let's join the declaration. Let's raise funding locally, domestically. Let's prioritize education. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary Jacob. As you said, it is in our hands. Thank you very much. Thank you to the panel.
Our thanks to our moderator and our distinguished panel.